Hello and welcome to episode 85 of the... Oh, hang on, I've forgotten what the podcast is called. It's just...
Maybe start that again.
Hello and welcome to episode 85 of the Sideways Life podcast. My name is Al.
My name's Leanne.
And what's the podcast about, Leanne?
It's a Sideways Life.
Well, what did I say?
The Sideways Life. It's a Sideways Life, and it's the honest guide to living and working abroad.
So, if you are thinking, if you're thinking of living elsewhere than your home, then this is the podcast for you. And in fact, if you are specifically thinking about living in Croatia for a year, which you should, because we've done it for 1 year last year, and then we're doing it again for another year this year, then this is the perfect episode for you, because we talked to an expert, a lovely lady called Susanna Levaya. She's a lawyer, part of Adriatic Sea Change. In fact, we actually know, I think we know Barbara, her partner, her business partner, more because we've dealt with Barbara in the last one, but she got us out of so many pickles doing our Digital Nomad visa last time. And so we're just in love with her, aren't we?
Yeah, it's just a brilliant organisation, and both Susanna and Barbara are incredible at what they do. So if you are considering living and working in Croatia, or if you're just spending some time comparing all the different digital nomad visas out here, then this is invaluable. Enjoy.
Brilliant. Okay, let's go and meet Susanna. Hey there, it's Al here, just editing this, and I realised the audio isn't brilliant on the Zoom call. We've done the best I possibly can, but if you've got any questions or anything you can't quite hear, then just DM us on Instagram or send an email to asksidewayslife@gmail.com, and I'm happy to get those questions answered. So I'm really excited to have Susanna Levaya here because Susanna not only is a lawyer and an expert in the visa in Croatia, but she did our visa for us when we last were in Pula, and we got out of the 12-month visa. We dealt with her and Barbara, fantastic people. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to ask them a load of the questions that you want to know about the Croatian visa. So welcome, Susanna.
Hi there. Thank you very much for hosting me. I'm very happy to be here and answer questions.
Brilliant. So Adriatic Sea Change is the company that you both co-own. Just give us a little sort of 2-minute background of who you are, what your background is, how you got into this game.
Yeah, so as you might be able to tell from my accent, I am originally from Sydney, although maybe mixed now because I live in London. So, but yeah, I'm originally from Sydney, and I'm a lawyer by trade, profession, and I moved over to London in sort of February 2020, sort of hoping to practice law there, and that was right before the kind of COVID time, so interesting timing there, but I decided to kind of stick it out and not go back home, and sort of came to Croatia. My parents are Croatian, so I have a Croatian background, and sort of that's how I could kind of came to be in Croatia during COVID. Sort of came to see family here, and then I guess during that time of being sort of a digital nomad myself, during COVID in Croatia, I kind of started to get involved with people who were working remotely, and that's how I became involved with Adriatic Sea Change, really.
Brilliant. Now, the Digital Nomad visa is relatively new, isn't it? Is it like 18 months old, 2 years old?
Yeah. So I think it's coming up to 2 years. So a relatively new concept in Croatia, and I guess globally.
Yeah, I know I think we were the 4th and 5th UK people to get the visa, and maybe like the 40th or 50th in total. And now, obviously, I'm guessing you're seeing a lot more people going for the visa this year.
Yeah, we are, and they're sort of, broadening out where, the jurisdictions that they're coming from. Initially it was, as you say, UK, the US. But we're now seeing, South America, a lot of Asia as well, some Australians who are now able to kind of travel a bit more. So yeah, it is really kind of taking off as people are kind of seeing, what they can do in terms of working remotely and having a bit more flexibility.
So let's do a little bit of a dive into the digital nomad visa. I'm guessing that most people listening to this will know the one exists. They'll probably know a little bit about it. Am I right in thinking that this is predominantly for third country nationals as opposed to people who live within the EU bloc at the moment?
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, if you live in the EU and have residency or passport, then you're able to come to Croatia and live here freely. So you wouldn't need the digital nomad visa, and you wouldn't have that kind of restriction of having the visa for only 12 months. So it is, as you say, for third country nationals, which now includes the UK and I guess rest of the world outside Europe.
And so, so we predominantly, because if you live in Germany, for example, we met some German people who just said, yeah, we come and live in Croatia. That's what we do, which is cool. Unfortunately, we won't go into the whole Brexit thing because I have very strong opinions about that, as I'm sure you do. Yeah. But for those people who are third countries, then is this the only visa that's available for them to live longer term in Croatia?
So it's not the only visa, but I would say it is the visa that is kind of the least administratively burdensome to kind of obtain. And the other visas are really to do with you having kind of long-term rental arrangements, or opening up a company, or being employed by someone in Croatia. So all of those, I mean, maybe some people fit those criteria, but they do involve, a little bit more kind of paperwork and sort of, if you need to set up a company in Croatia, for example, and then, employ yourself or something like that, that takes obviously a lot more, capital as well as time. Whereas a digital nomad visa is just sort of by nature, you're able to kind of work remotely, and, therefore, you're entitled to kind of apply. And generally, if you meet the criteria, which are, pretty low bar, then you're able to get the visa for 12 months.
So I'm going to come back to the 12-month thing because there is a catch there, isn't there? So I'll come back to that in a second. So you've mentioned a lot of other things. We've looked into those, like setting up a company, and there's an awful lot of money you need to put into it, and then you have to employ some locals as well, I think, and it seemed quite scary to us. We looked at buying somewhere, and they were like, well, yeah, but then you still only get 9 months, I think. Is that right? You're only allowed 9 months? Okay, and so when we're talking about the visas, then this sounds perfect for the type of person who works remotely, who earns income from outside of Croatia, so they might have freelancer or perhaps even employed, and they come and live in Croatia. So just describe to me who the perfect person this visa is for.
Yeah, so they're sort of, I would put them in two categories. So you're either somebody who is employed for a company that pays them kind of regular income, and you're able to do your job, via technology from anywhere in the world, really. The second category is that you're either sort of either a freelancer or employed for yourself, and then you might not have such a regular income, but you've got a sufficient amount of capital, and you're also able to kind of work anywhere via technology. So I guess the common theme being you're able to work remotely, by just using technology and having an internet connection. The reason I mentioned the regular income versus kind of having capital is because there's obviously income thresholds, which I guess we can touch on now or later. But yeah, that's kind of the ideal applicant.
So let's talk about the income then. So what do people either need to earn or need to have in savings to qualify? Yeah,
so the currently the amount is almost 18,000 krona, just under. So that's approximately 2,400 euros, and depending on the exchange rate, kind of the similar for American dollars. So that's proof of income and pay slips for the last kind of 6 months of that amount coming in. And if you don't have that, and you're only able to show like a smaller period, or you get sort of irregular income, then you need to kind of have that capital up front, which is 12 months worth of that monthly amount, which I think comes to around 28,500 euros.
So you either have to prove that you have consistently earned 2,400 euros or more, or you need to prove that you've got savings about 12 times that, which is whatever that is.
Yes, exactly. But importantly enough, you still sort of need to kind of have earnings coming in, even if you're proving that you have upfront capital, because otherwise then you would not really be a remote worker. And I think, they are wanting to attract just remote workers who actually are doing some kind of work.
So what happens if there's a husband and wife team? Do they both have to earn 2,400 or have double the amount in savings?
Well, no, it depends on whether you are sort of whether you apply as a dependent, so or whether you want sort of two individual visas. So if you are applying as a dependent, it's something called family reunification. So you can have a husband, a wife, or some kids, and for each and every dependent, the income threshold we were just talking about goes up by 10%.
Okay, well, that makes sense then. So let's go on to the restrictions in this. So if I remember, and you tell me about this, if I remember, it's something like you can't reapply within a certain time and you can't earn income in Croatia. Talk us through that. What are the restrictions of this?
Yeah, so there is a restriction. So if you kind of get your visa for a 12-month period and you want to reapply, you can't do that for the next 6 months. So 6 months has to lapse between that your visa ending and your next sort of visa being granted. So you would either need to leave the country for the entire period, or if you are able to come back, not on the digital nomad visa, for example, if you're from the UK, you've got that 3 months of the year that you can spend in Croatia. Then you could kind of bridge the gap a little bit, but you would need to spend at least that 3 months outside of Croatia.
And I'm curious then, so one of the stipulations, if I remember, was that you weren't allowed to earn income within Croatia or work for a Croatian company.
Yeah.
So what about people who have, say, rental properties in other countries, or they earn money from crypto? Is this a bit more clear cut? Is there anything about that?
So the income tax kind of rules are quite complex, really. But I think that the essence is that you're not considered a tax resident in Croatia, right? So your income earned from that job or whatever else you do in the world is not taxed in Croatia for that year while you are a digital nomad on the digital nomad visa. But if you are a tax resident, in America or in another country, then the rules of that country do still apply to you with respect to, whatever income you're earning. And I think that's most relevant probably for Americans who sort of have tax obligations globally, where, even if they don't live in the States.
And I think this is one of the things that appealed to us was when we first learnt about it, was that coming from the UK, then you can pay 0% tax on your income if you have this visa and become a tax resident of Croatia. I mean, we're talking 0% tax. Is that right?
Yeah. So I guess for that year, because you wouldn't actually have a tax obligation in the UK because you're not a resident there. So I mean, it's a pretty good outcome. Shame it's only for 12 months.
Yeah, but then of course there's the option of maybe going to neighbouring Bosnia and Herzegovina, and you can go stay there.
That is true. Yeah.
So I think we love it, and we're going for our second visa in probably in about 3 weeks' time. I think we'll be talking to you.
Okay.
So let's talk through, because we went through the process for the first time about 12 months ago. Let's talk through what the process is, and then I'll ask you whether it's possible for someone to do it themselves compared to getting some help from someone like you.
Yeah. So the process really is about gathering enough evidence about you and what you do for work to kind of satisfy the criteria of working remotely. and also sort of meeting the income threshold. And then you've obviously got to kind of satisfy the Croatian government that you've got a good, record and you don't have any criminal activity in the past, that kind of thing. And then there's other requirements around kind of where you're going to live. So you need some rental arrangements in place and insurance. So those are kind of the main things, but just to kind of talk through some of those because they can be more complicated depending on your circumstances. So when you're kind of showing your proof of income and proof of employment, we really find that some of the requirements that each case officer has really do vary. And I guess that kind of makes sense because not everybody has, the same sort of background. Some people, are regular employees and kind of get, monthly pay. Some work by the hour. So there's, depending on the different sort of scenarios, there are different documents that they do ask. And then the other things that, we sometimes get caught up in discussing is actually sort of proving that this company, whether it's your employer or your own company, is actually real and you're not sort of forging your documents. So, it can be quite tricky trying to gather all those documents and also just trying to sort of foresee what documents you might require. So we've obviously dealt with lots of different scenarios and, upfront are pretty good at saying you're probably going to need X, Y, and Z. Go and ask your employer or go and gather these if you own your own company, so that we're not kind of engaged in a lot of back and forth. Then on the rental side, so, lots of people don't want to kind of commit upfront to, having a rental agreement for a year or however long before they know with some degree of certainty that they're going to get their visa. We're quite often involved in advising exactly how they should go about either changing their address or entering into longer or shorter term agreements. And the police can the case officers at the Croatian police can get quite involved in sort of, some of them will try and say, you absolutely need you have to have a rental agreement for a whole year, which, you really don't. So those are the things that, we were quite often arguing about. And it's the same for insurance, really. I think, you don't actually need to get it for the full year, and you can kind of get it for, the next 2 months and then sort of see how the visa process goes. So those are all the things that you kind of need to take into account and sort of consider up front. And, but because we've dealt with so many of these and had so many different scenarios come up with different kind of case officers, depending on whether you're in Pula, Zagreb, Split or Dubrovnik or wherever, we're quite attuned to what the different police stations require and how to deal with different scenarios.
I think that's probably, and I don't want this to be an advert for you, even though we've used you before and we think you're great. But I think with anything to do with legal, particularly sort of like visas, then you've got two levels of translation. You've got the actual language translation, and then you've got the translation of what the actual regulations mean. And I know with our application, looking at what other people were doing in Zagreb, there was different requirements, even though it's the same visa application. So, I mean, it's...
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing which is probably quite frustrating for people going through this process is that quite often the communication is in Croatian. So you receive an email and you see it and it's in Croatian, and then you're sort of trying to put it into Google Translate and sort of see what exactly it's requiring. So frustratingly enough, there's just not enough people in Croatia that work on these visa applications that are actually quite fluent in English. So that's the other thing that we find is that often you just cut through a lot of things, cut through a lot of crap, going to say, by just being able to speak the same language. So, that's a way that we quite often speed things up a little bit, because we're not kind of having that language barrier. We can just pick up the phone and be quite pushy with them, which I think as a foreigner, you might not either have the comfort or even just the language skills to do that.
Absolutely. I think before I go on to your thoughts on the changes with Schengen and whatever, just you saved our ass at least once, because we were in the police station in Pula and they said they didn't have a document. We knew they did, and you just got on the phone and spoke to them and smoothed it all out. So we're huge fans of you, and you just stopped us from it was difficult enough having to, like, for example, I think we went to the actual visa, went to the desk, we got our visa, they said, right, now you need to go and pay your tax and get a stamp, and we're like, okay, well, what time's so we went to the stamp, and the woman had gone for half an hour break, and we're like, well, our appointment's only from 11 till 12, so she's gone from 11:30. So it was it's quite a frustrating experience, with even if you get someone to help out, because the actual on the ground can be quite frustrating. So I'm curious. There is talk of, and I don't know whether it's definite or not, there's talk of Croatia joining the Schengen zone sometime soon. I know we go to the Euro in January, I think. Do you foresee any changes in how the visa might work if you are part of the Schengen zone?
Not really. I think at the moment, the way that it's sort of applied in terms of that 3-month period that you're able to kind of travel, I think it's actually separately counted where you're in Schengen, where you're in Croatia. So I think once Croatia joins, your time in Croatia will be timing all of Schengen. So effectively kind of worse off depending on how you look at it. But I don't think the actual process itself will change. I don't think that there's anything sort of in terms of the rules of the visa that will change. Sort of unrelated to Schengen, we've been having some discussions in the various ministries about trying to get a little bit more time for people, so that they can kind of have 2 years on the digital nomad visa, which I think it is different to the Schengen rules. But I think because the countries in the region are kind of doing things like that, I think Croatia is trying to look at it and see whether they can do that and be a bit more competitive, because it is sort of becoming it's quite tricky. A lot of countries caught on to this and have visas and have different things for digital nomads, so it is quite competitive actually.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice if they did stop the remove the 6-month restriction, because we'd love to stay here permanently. But I understand that there's a hard border, really. I mean, it's the last country before non-Schengen, isn't it, and non-EU? So I understand why they have to have it.
Yeah. So we're active on our Facebook page. So Adriatic Sea Change, or you can email us at info@croatiafordigitalnomad.com. That's sort of the two main ways. Or we're also, if you're in some of the Facebook groups for digital nomads, we're kind of active there, and you can tag us there and ask us questions. But Facebook's probably the easiest way. You can direct message us if you've got any questions or anything like that, and we'll get in touch. I will also say, we do quite often speak to people kind of on a no obligation basis, just to kind of see whether it is appropriate for you to kind of get the visa, or to get a feel for us and what we can do, how we can help. So do get in touch. We're not kind of just looking to charge you immediately. It is something we do kind of have a conversation and then sort of see whether it's the right fit.
So that's Susanna. She is very knowledgeable. I'm afraid the audio wasn't always the best because we're on Zoom, and Zoom's not brilliant at recording audio. But if you've got any question or anything you didn't quite catch, then obviously just DM us on DM us on Instagram, Sideways Life, and we'll be able to tell you, or better still, get in touch with them directly. So, Leah, what did you think?
Just brilliant. It's all the information that you need to go about applying for the visa. And I think anything that has to do with staying rights, and the government is always complicated, and there's always a bit of red tape and a bit of bureaucracy. That is just the way it is. So don't get angry, get prepared. And I think Susanna is a great person to help you do that. You can absolutely do it yourself. You can. I think it's whether it comes down to time and money, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the money to invest in that, go, do it. There's so much more support now than there was kind of this time last year when we were applying for it. So yeah, get on the Digital Nomad Croatia groups, have a look at lots of different websites. Expat in Croatia is a really knowledgeable resource as well. You can do it yourself, but if you'd rather save some time and energy, throw some money at the problem, as Al and I like to say, couldn't recommend Adriatic Sea Change more highly.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic people. And I mean, the other thing which we discovered, and she did mention it in the call, is that if you apply in Zagreb compared to, say, Pula, compared to Split, there are different requirements. Even though it's the same visa, then they just make things up. They're like, all right, we want to see this suddenly. We went to the police station to pick up our visa, I think, or was it, well, I can't remember. We went in the police station for something, and we got ourselves in a pickle. She went, have you got this form? We were like, no. And she went, oh, you can't get it. And we were like, wait 1 second, let's ring Barbara up and get her on the phone. So Barbara rung up, we rung her up, she spoke to the police and basically straightened it out, or threatened her. I don't know what Barbara did, but
it's best we don't know.
It was all sorted, and we went on our merry ways. So, as Leanne said, it's not for everyone because not everyone has the budget, but we're not talking a lot of money. Genuinely can't remember how much we paid, but certainly it wasn't like thousands to get this done.
It was under £1,000 for both of us. I think, if I remember right, it was around the maybe 6, 7. Oh, do you know what? I can't remember, but it was under £1,000 for both of us.
So 100% we use them again. We will be using them again in about 10 to 20 days time. We're going for our second visa. So you can find them if you just go into Facebook, probably the best way. Go into Facebook and type in Adriatic Sea Change. Adriatic as in the Adriatic Sea, which is just outside our window right now, isn't it?
It is. And if you want to know a bit more about living and working in Split specifically, you can check out episode 74. I mentioned that, I know listeners, most of you probably heard it already, but we find we tend to get some new listeners when we do an episode like this. So if this is your first episode, welcome. And if you want to know a bit more about living in Croatia, living in Split, check out episode 74. Or, as I mentioned at the top, if you are looking at different digital nomad visas and you are comparing and contrasting, check out episode 79. That's when we did an interview with a fabulous lady about the Spanish digital nomad visa.
Definitely. So, if you are thinking of coming to Croatia, then send us a DM.
Yeah, look us up.
If you're old school like me, then go to your email, sidewayslife@gmail.com, sidewayslife@gmail.com. And we read everything. I'm pretending that we get thousands of emails a day. We don't. We probably get about 5, and 4 of those are just rubbish.
But we do read them.
But we do read them, and we do reply, as previous guests have found out, to their surprise. Okay, so next week is a complete surprise to everyone because we've not planned anything, have we?
No.
But there is a guest that we're trying to pin down. If I just say the Digital Nomad King, then maybe you'll have an idea of who it is we're trying to get.
Bromad 1.0.
Bromad 1.0? Brilliant. So that's who we're out after. You will find out next week if we've got an interview with him. Otherwise, we'll just pretend we never mentioned it.
And we'll talk about something interesting. Probably.
All right. Well, so we say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.